Hello and welcome to What the Huck. I'm gonna introduce my co-host Henry, who you might sometimes hear say, "What the heck?"
And this is my co-host Safie, who's kicking the table, and you might sometimes hear say something else.
Restless leg syndrome.
Yeah, you could say that. We'll say that. So Safie, today we've got a very interesting topic, one that you're going to be teaching me alongside our audience for. But before we even get to that topic and before you can start introducing it, viewers on YouTube, remember this show is simultaneously released on YouTube and on podcast feeds, so choose whatever one you like. Viewers on YouTube will see that we have a new poster up today. So Safie, let us describe what the listeners on the podcast are not seeing that the viewers on YouTube are seeing. What do we have behind us?
Yeah, sure. Let me take a look at this boy myself. So it's a very cute boy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, if I'm seeing it correctly.
You are.
Yeah, and then there's a caption, and it says, "Get top grades."
Isn't this 5?
Yeah, but it would take us a little bit of time to explain that
5 is the top score in the Russian grading system. It says get 5s or something along the lines of this.
Which is funny because in the German school system, it's like...
It's the worst.
No, it's not the worst. It's second to worst because 6 is the worst.
Oh, we didn't even talk about having 6 when I lived in Germany. But yeah, this is a poster. It's a reproduction of a poster from 1957. Let me get my notes. By Suryananov, which I am probably butchering the pronunciation of, but it's from a poster that was originally designed in Moscow in 1957, and we're going to encourage you to study and do your best and get your top marks. But Safie, now I'm going to be basically turning the reins over to you today. I might have a few questions for you rather than actual commentary or anything along those lines. We're going to be having a continuing series of episodes on our program on a related topic, something that is near and dear to your heart. And this episode is going to be the introduction for this series. So we're not going to get super deep here, but we will have episodes that get deeper and deeper and deeper into this topic as time goes on. Safie, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Henry. Thanks for having me.
It's your show. It's your show.
Recording it on my computer.
It's your show.
Yeah, well, anyway, the topic that we'll be covering in our next episode and, in this series of episodes will be bilingualism. Yeah. The reason why I personally have a vested interest in it is because, actually, there's multiple reasons for that. First, I kind of consider myself to be bilingual a little bit.
She knows 4 languages.
Yeah, and that kind of says that I don't know math because I just said that I consider myself bilingual.
Yes, and I mean, she knows bits and pieces of more than that, but she knows 4 languages.
Yeah, I'm bilingual. I know 4 languages. Good for me. Anyway.
Wait, since you studied Latin for a while, what does bi mean?
2, Henry. It means 2.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, anyway, and my biggest source of inspiration for this topic is a couple books that I recently finished reading. First, it's The Bilingual Brain by Albert Costa, and also, How Languages Are Learned, which is am I still kicking the table?
Yes, that's okay. Keep going.
Okay, good. I'm not kicking you.
For once.
Well, anyway, and How Languages Are Learned by Patsy Lightbound and Nina Spada. It also covers bilingualism, and I found it really, really fascinating. But also, I want to give the credit to my applied linguistics teacher, who, I did revise my notes on bilingualism before we sat down to record. So Elena Andreevna, thank you so much.
It's worth just mentioning for listeners who are tuning in for this episode who didn't listen to our introductory episode, which, fair enough, you didn't want to listen to who we are. Safie is a linguist by training, a up-and-coming star in the field. This is my well-reasoned opinion.
I just graduated, so...
In any case, she's a linguist by training, and that's why this is also an interesting topic for her. In addition to knowing 100 languages, she also studied linguistics to understand linguistics from both like societal aspect, but also now you're starting to get into more of the science,
neurolinguistics and all that, like just diving deeper, things that I'm really interested in. Also it's really important to know that there is a lot of misconceptions about bilingualism, which I would really like to debunk, like maybe the most common ones. Just because bilingualism isn't an exception, it's more of a rule. Albert Costa says that in his book. So it's really worth mentioning and understanding how two languages can coexist in one brain, and what are like the advantages and the drawbacks of that.
Safie, before we get any further, I have a question for you, which is, I know when I hear the word bilingualism, and when most people hear the word bilingualism, they have like a very vague idea of what bilingualism means. I mean, if we just take the root of it, it means two languages. But before we start talking about, the neurolinguistic side of things and all of these more advanced concepts that we're going to touch on in this introductory episode, but then dive deeper into when we bring experts in the field onto the show to talk about with us. What does it mean, bilingualism, from a functional standpoint? What does it mean from a theoretical standpoint? Like, when you hear bilingualism, as somebody who's a trained linguist, what are you thinking? Because not that I'm a layperson, but I'm definitely not a linguist by training. When I hear bilingualism, I just think, well, this person can speak two languages or more.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you said that most people have a very vague idea of what bilingualism really means. I feel like most people have a very established idea about it. Meaning what?
So established but not well informed is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, exactly. So what I mean by that is that bilingualism is most widely understood as a phenomenon when a person can speak two languages fluently. Yeah. So that person is fluent in two languages. They don't have an accent, like a foreign sounding accent in either of the languages. So basically bilinguals are often seen as those, like, I don't know, two monolinguals in one person. That's what I'm saying. In reality, however, and it's something that I only learned at university, because before that, I guess I just wasn't that into the topic. It's it doesn't mean equal fluency in both languages at all. Then a lot of bilinguals have an accent in either of the languages.
Sure.
And also they might have acquired the language when they were adults. So that's how reality looks. So just to sum it up, bilingualism kind of exists in a sort of a continuum, so you can be very close to being a native in both languages. You're still going to have a dominant language, or you can just be a beginner in one language and a really fluent person in your other language.
The fact that you mentioned accents, it makes me just want to say one quick thing before I let you go on, which is, you mentioned that a lot of people think that if somebody can speak multiple languages, more than one language, with no accent in either language, that's a hallmark of bilingualism. This is a crock of crap. Like, just flat out. In the United States, for example, think about the diversity of accents that we have in the United States. Of course, I'm originally from the United States. I don't live there anymore. But in the United States, we have many, many different accents. We don't consider these people to not be fluent in English because they have an accent. The difference is that these accents are now understood to be an accent of a native speaker. But there's nothing inherent about that accent that is a hallmark of a native speaker. It's just that culturally we've accepted that as an accent of a native speaker. Whereas you could have somebody from Timbuktu, which is in Mali. We use it as a catch-all term, but we could have somebody from the actual Timbuktu, Mali, who knows English far better than me, because I will be the first to tell you that I do not use perfect English. We could have somebody from Timbuktu, Mali, who still has a very heavy Malian accent, that knows English far better than me, perhaps even thinks in English, as their dominant language, but still has that accent. That accent means absolutely nothing with regards to their bilingual ability, because in Mali, the native language is French. So the accent point is one that really drives me crazy, because a lot of people that are not exposed to people from other countries will hear an accent and think, that person can't have true fluency in that language because they haven't lost their accent yet. This is such a crock of crap. Just think about in the United States all of the accents that we have. I mean, think about the basically the bigotry that we could have if we didn't consider a certain accent to be a hallmark of a native speaker. Let's say that we hear somebody from Boston and say, that person doesn't know true English. Listen to how silly these people from Boston sound. And they do. My opinion, of course. But yeah, that's just one point that I wanted to pick up.
Accents are a whole other domain that we'll need to cover as well. But some accents are just considered more desirable than others.
That's an actual term, yes? Desirable accents?
I've read about it somewhere, but I'm not gonna say that I can name the source. It's just, I
believe I've also read that in
It's just a well-established thing that, a lot of people aspire to having a neutral accent in their second language. I'm just an example of that.
Because English is not your native language, but yet when we talk to people that are native English speakers, they often say, you have a very neutral accent. We can't really understand that you are not a native English speaker. This happens with my parents, with my grandparents. We talk with Safie, and they all say...
they kind of still know where I'm from.
They know where you're from, but based on the accent, they're not able to discern it. But on the other hand, and I'm sorry to sidetrack us again, but for example, when I went to my undergrad was in the same state that I was born and raised in, which is Michigan. This is just a little bit of information for those of you that are in the United States and might be able to glean something from this. In Michigan, we have two peninsulas, the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula, and they are only connected by a bridge and, culturally speaking, completely separate from one another. Even to the fact that people from the Upper Peninsula, where I'm from, have a different accent than people in the Lower Peninsula. When I went to university in the Lower Peninsula, it was almost at least a weekly occurrence, if not almost a daily occurrence, that somebody would point out, if not make fun, of the accent that I had, despite the fact that I grew up and spent my entire life living in the same state as the university. Just the opposite side of the thing, where people can't really tell where she's from, whereas people immediately, even though we were living very close to one another, could tell where I was from.
Well, I think it's also intertwined with the fact that you have to have an ear for it. So when I hear other Russian speakers, I'm so bad at telling where they're from. Like 99.9% of the time, I just don't know. Until I actually ask where they're from, I won't know. And it's just something that I'm really used to. So it's, I don't know, it's amazing to me how other, how people...
Taxi drivers. How taxi drivers.
Taxi drivers, that's right. Yeah, how taxi drivers... This
is a specific example, listeners.
Point, was going. Anyway, how other people are able to discern that so easily. Like in German, when I hear German speakers, I can roughly tell their origin just based on their accent. I mean, sure, it'll be very broad and very, very rough, but still, I I do hear a difference. In Russian, not at all, just none.
Which is really interesting considering Russian's your native language and German is not. So it just goes to show that just because it's your native language doesn't mean that you have more of an ear to discern the accents from in that language than in another language that you've acquired later on. When did you start learning German? What age were you?
About the same age that I started actively learning English, I think 14.
Okay. So only at the age of 14 she started learning German, and now is able to discern the accents of people in that language. But
no, it's not a huge achievement, but
well,
yeah.
I'm just trying to illustrate something.
Yeah, I'm gonna connect that to a point that we made earlier about.
Go ahead.
About how narrow of a view it is to only consider those fluent in 2 languages or more languages, bilingual or multilingual. Because your level of fluency often depends on the purpose of your language learning. It can be A1, A2, B1, B2, it doesn't matter. You're still going to be considered bilingual.
And for the listeners that are unaware of these classifications, because up until a couple of years ago, I also had no idea what these letters meant. Can you just briefly explain what is A, B, and C in terms of these levels, and then what the numbers? Higher number, of course, is going up towards the next level, but what is the difference between an A level and a B level and a C level?
It's a common European framework of reference for languages, and it goes from beginner, then elementary, then intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced, and the last one is C2. Yeah, good. C2 is fluent.
So essentially native-like proficiency would be C2.
Native-like proficiency. If you've got a C2 certificate, it does not necessarily mean you're native-like in your second language at all.
That's how somebody would perceive it, though. If you gave them that certificate, they would think this person has native-like proficiency, whereas A1 is more advanced than my Russian, but that's where I am achieving to get in the somewhat near
now
future.
There's also, I think, A0, so it's...
I'm less than 0.
I'm not sure if there is a minus, but...
They'll invent it for me.
Yeah.
Well, as we move on, I know you have some other things that you want to say, but I do have one other question that perhaps will allow you to say some of the things that you want to say, which is, when we're talking about bilingualism, again, when we hear bilingualism, we just think somebody who can speak 2 languages or more, but it doesn't discern when this person learned their second or third languages. What I'm curious about, and I kind of know the answer because we've had conversations about this, but you haven't fully briefed me on this. We said we'll talk about it on the show. There is differences in people who learn it as a child and people who learn it as an adult. Yeah? Especially at the neurolinguistic level. I don't know if you have anything that you want to say about that, but I do know that there was differences between people who learned a second language as a very young baby, essentially, and people who only were exposed to it in their later life.
Yeah. As far as your question is concerned, there's, in linguistics, there's 2 things: sequential bilingualism and simultaneous bilingualism, which, I think you can glean something from that.
I'm going to assume that sequential means that you learn one language first, and then you learn your second language based on your first language.
Yeah, so the age of acquisition of both languages isn't the same. And the thing is that research is very contradictory on this question. So some linguists would say that even starting learning a second language a month later than your first one would make you a sequential bilingual person.
Really?
Yes.
That's
whereas
crazy.
some other scientists would assume that it would only happen after 3 years. So if
is this a big debate that's happening? Because I genuinely have no idea about that.
Yeah, it is. It is. The thing. Well, it actually. It has to do with phonological discrimination. Yeah, phonological discrimination.
Which is what?
Well, babies are actually really intelligent machines. When they're born,
It would surprise you, listeners.
yeah,
It would
you'd think
surprise
that they
you.
can only eat and scream and cry and, do...
Excrete. It's true. Babies excrete.
I know. I wasn't going to mention that.
Wow.
Well, anyway, you wouldn't really think that little baby is capable of a huge thing that most adults aren't capable of. It's phonological discrimination. So when a baby is born, then they're able to tell the difference between the sounds of any languages on earth. So it doesn't matter what language they're exposed to. They will still be able to tell the difference between this language and French, this language and their other language, their second language. They're really, really talented. But, a very big but here, this ability does start to go down, I think at the age of 6 months, something like that.
Wow, that's really early.
Exactly. So that's why those timestamps are really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's so the question that I'm just trying to dive a little bit deeper on, if you have anything else that you want to share on this, is how else, excuse me, how else does the age at which you learn your second language impact you? Because, for example, I know that we've had conversations about, and by conversations I mean you telling me and me going, I understand, but not really understanding.
See, dear viewers and listeners.
I'm the first to admit when I don't understand something. I will tell you, listeners, now that there's plenty of things I don't understand, and I will make a fool of myself on this show time and time again, and I will own it every time. But one of the things that you were telling me about was and correct me if I'm wrong, but is along the lines that there's also a debate going on within the field on bilingualism in early adolescence. So like in childhood, bilingualism, making it more difficult for these children as they're growing to acquire as big of a vocabulary in either language as they would have if they were just monolingual. I know that was one of the debates that you had talked about, but I know that there was some other things as well. Is there anything else that you want to just share in this Again, this is an introductory episode. We will bring on super duper neurolinguistic experts to explain to us. But from what you gleaned, was there anything else along these lines?
So whether bilingual children are slower, or just slower.
Yeah, and listeners know what we mean.
Yeah. Well, first, I don't want to go into that beehive right now because there's a huge
debate. This is the one that I did remember that there was a big debate on.
Yeah. So, basically, the main arguments against childhood bilingualism go like this. There is a unitary language system, so the kids are gonna mix up languages all the time, and they'll code switch again, always, which will interfere with human interaction and communication. Then what else? They're gonna be developing slower as a result of this bilingualism.
Why? Is there any reason why that this is thought? I mean, of course, there's going to be a lot of competing theories, listeners. So when I'm asking Safie why, I'm asking for perhaps, and again, we haven't discussed this, other than the random conversations that we've had in the past.
Yeah, I would like to bring on more scientific evidence because I do have it all, but from my notes...
Do you remember any explanations?
Of course I do.
Give me maybe one example, because this is a very strange thought to me personally, and I know that at least some of the listeners that are listening are going to be in the same boat as me. Why would somebody think this? And listeners, there are a variety of reasons which she has told me in the past, but I do not remember. So can you give one example.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna give you just one example. Let's do vocabulary in this
Sure.
regard. So let's take a kid, a bilingual kid, say English French, 3 years old. How big do you think that kid's vocabulary is going to be when compared to that of a monolingual kid?
See, now, this is where I probably am going to make a fool of myself by saying that I would have assumed that the vocabulary would be roughly the same in each language, but I know that this is not.
How do you mean in each language here?
I mean, I feel that if you said living in France,
Doesn't
matter.
Doesn't matter. Just let's take a monolingual kid and a bilingual kid,
Okay.
and compare their vocabularies.
I would assume that the vocabularies would be roughly the same in whatever the one that they would consider their primary language, with a slight delay or a slight lag in their secondary language. But again, I know that this isn't what a lot of experts think. So, me thinking this is probably saying that I haven't thought through this question very much. But my assumption would be that there's nothing inherent about bilingualism that would make you acquire vocabulary in a given language slower than somebody who doesn't have the capacity for another language. But what do I know?
Well, yeah, the thing is, their vocabularies are going to be pretty much the same in size. However, in bilingual kids, it'll be divided between two languages. So let's say this kid knows 50 words and this kid knows 50 words. But for the monolingual, it'll be just 50 words in one language, And for the bilingual kid, it'll be 25 words in one language and 25 words in the other language. So they will be, they might be considered like less intelligent or slower or, I don't know, dumber in every given language when this fact is not taken into consideration. Bilingualism as it is. Yeah.
Mathematically, this makes sense. I just have, and again, we're going to bring on people who are experts in this field to explain it to us, perhaps from both perspectives. People that do ascribe to one theory and then people that ascribe to the opposing view. But, it strikes me as very hard to believe that there's something inherent about bilingualism that would cause you to split your acquired vocabulary, like not necessarily evenly, but that that there's a set rate at which you can acquire new vocabulary, and that then it's split into one of two branches, as opposed to just having the capacity for more knowledge, more learning of vocabulary, because you have the capacity to learn words in either language. And that's not to mention the fact that in many languages, of course, there's a lot of words that if you know the word in one language, you will at least understand the meaning of a word in another language when you encounter it, even if you didn't already know the word. That happens to me here in Russia. I go around and I see some words. Of course, it's in the Cyrillic alphabet, which I can read. I don't know what any of the words mean, but there are a lot of loan words, or there's a lot of words that have Latin roots, for example, and I can ascertain some meaning from them despite not knowing any Russian. Now, I'm not trying to say that this is the case with like bilingual kids, but I would assume that having a functioning knowledge of each language would make it much easier to add new vocabulary based on your knowledge of other languages that are at least tangentially related to the second language. But this is, again, entirely unfounded on anything. This is just what's in my mind.
But we're talking like 3-year-olds here.
Sure.
Yeah, they're not going to know about internationalisms or just words that are very similar or pretty much the same in both languages. It's just, let's see. This is a mug, right?
Yeah. She's holding a mug for listeners that are on the podcast.
Yeah.
A handmade mug that I got for her. It's very cute.
Yes, it is very cute, and you're getting carried away. Anyway, this is a mug.
Yes.
Now, if the child knows that this is called mug in English, then why would they need to know what it's called in their other language? They're working on the basis of exclusion here. If they know one word for it, they'll think that they won't need another word for it. So they can say like, okay, give me this, and then blink in the word for mug in this other language. I mean, sure, later on they will learn like equivalents,
Sure.
but only 30% from what I read. Yeah, the age I'm pulling a blank on. Well, anyway, I'll read up on it and I'll add it in the description below.
And we'll also, of course, talk about this. Like I said, this is an introductory episode. We're going to have a bunch of episodes in this series on bilingualism. But yeah, carry on.
So, why only 30% of words have equivalents in their second language? Because kids don't copy every single experience in their other language.
That's true.
And I just know it for sure. Like, I did acquire Ukrainian and Russian at a very young age, but then I learned English and German, and there's some things that I can talk about in English that I can't talk about in Russian or in German, or it's just, different domains, because it's not like I learn about something, I read a book in one language and then I reread it in every other language that I know. Not at all.
Right.
It'll be boring.
Okay, this is totally true. This shows that sometimes my thought process is not fully fleshed out, because, I mean, this explanation makes a lot of sense. But again, listeners, we're going to move on to other topics within this introduction, because if we keep talking about this specific thing, then we'll have, fleshed out a lot of the ideas that we want to actually talk about with people that research this sort of thing. I have one more question for you, and then I'll let you run through any other notes that you want to make.
I actually want to finish this one.
Oh, okay, go ahead. I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, I mean finish this episode. Oh. Because it's been going for over
Sorry.
half an hour.
Sorry. I have one more story that I can tell.
Okay.
Because it is related.
Sure.
Today on the bus.
Oh, that one, sure.
Today on the bus, we're riding, and when the ticket taker, what's the word that we have for them?
Ticketer, we call them.
In Russian?
No. I don't know what we call them in Russian.
I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyway, when the ticketer comes around with their card reader, one of us pays for both of us, because it's just faster for one of us to grab the card, and then, the next time the other one will pay for both tickets. And both times that we had a ticketer today, when they gave us our tickets, Safie, what did you say to them?
Thank you.
Yes, but you said thank you in what language?
Yeah, it came out in English.
Which is very interesting to me. I caught it both times. I mean, it was very, very surprising to me, and it shouldn't have been, because we've had this conversation before, and this is why we're bringing it up now.
Yeah.
It was surprising to me because, of course, you are a native Russian speaker. And you said thank you in English to these ticketers that, of course, probably only speak Russian.
Yeah, and Tatar.
And Tatar as well, because we're in an area that has a national language. When I'm on the bus, even though my Russian is, like, appallingly non-existent, to be quite frank with you, I always say spasiba. I never say thank you. And so both times I pointed this out, and I was thinking to myself, like, very strange. The native Russian is the one who's, like, having slips in English. I would have assumed that would have been me.
It's not that I didn't want to use my native language with other speakers of my native language. Not at all. It's just...
It slipped out. You weren't thinking.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's a reason why, because I pointed this out and I said, this is really funny, and it's really strange. And you said, really, it's actually not that strange, because remember...
Code switching.
Which is what?
Oh, no, it's not code switching. Is it code switching? I don't know. I'm tired.
It's
I
late.
Go to bed.
It's late, listeners, and the battery level is running very low.
Oh.
Can you just explain briefly why I shouldn't have been surprised, and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah. So it's just, it's still code switching, language switching.
Yes, it's language switching, code switching.
Yeah. Well, there is a hypothesis, or maybe a theory, about how challenging it might be to switch into your second language. And from what I read about it, it's from Albert Costa's book. It was actually a shock to me. that it's more difficult to switch into your dominant language rather than your your non-dominant language.
So what you're saying, because there's a lot of processing going on when you're switching languages like mid-conversation. Because we were talking in English, of course. And
there's a lot of inhibition involved in this because your other language is never turned off when you're speaking your first language. The thing is, it might be difficult to switch. But for balanced bilinguals, it's fine. Like, they can switch just like this. I don't consider myself a balanced bilingual because, I don't know. It's just sometimes I would have really bad Russian days. Sometimes I'd have really bad English days or really bad German days, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just, it happens. It happens a lot. So
you said the theory is, though, that when somebody who's not a balanced bilingual is having to switch from one language to the other mid-conversation, it's harder to switch from dominant language, non-dominant language to dominant language than it is in the opposite, from the dominant language to the non-dominant language, which is the opposite of what I would have thought.
Probably that was the opposite of what I thought before I read the book. That's right.
But alas, Albert Costa, who was a neurolinguist himself, laid it out in his book for you, and you were talking about it a lot. So I don't know. On the bus, it really shouldn't have been a surprise to me, but it was.
Well, I do know some.
Keep talking. I'm going to plug this in.
Really astonishing cases of balanced bilingualism. Like on YouTube, there's this channel. I think German with Jenny, if I'm not mistaken. Lingoni, something like that. And the German teacher from the channel, she always switches like sentence after sentence. So she'd explain something in English about German, then she'd give 2 sample sentences in German, and then she'd switch back to English. Like, whenever I watch her, it's just, I don't know, I'm in awe because it's like I'm in a circus, although I never go to the circus.
You want to?
No, I don't really.
Okay, then we won't go.
Well, anyway, I'm not like that. So, it's great. It's great. I really admire such people.
Yeah. Any last note before we wrap up?
So any claims that I've made during this video, I will make sure to back them up with scientific evidence and like scientific research, because I do have it all. It's just I'd have to compile it from 2 books and the linguistics course that I took, but I will sure make the effort, because I know how important it is not to make any empty claims about such an important thing, because there are so many misconceptions about this phenomenon that I don't want to be another one, like another person on the internet just saying things left and right that are not necessarily true.
I mean, she is a trained linguist after all. This is what she does. But again,
that doesn't really give me the right to.
It doesn't give you the
mention.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't give you the right, but it shows that you will take this part of it seriously.
Yeah.
You're not just some blowhard who's wearing a blue shirt, sitting on the screen, who's saying things that are probably totally unfounded. But this is a learning experience for me. I'm upfront about that. I really don't know much about this, but I'm very curious. So I'm grateful that you're willing to, have the conversations with me off the camera, have this conversation with me on the camera, and I'm really happy that we'll be able to talk to actual research scientists in this field that'll be able to clarify things for you and hopefully get things into my thick skull so that I also understand them to some level, because this is quite complicated stuff, because there's so many debates within this field. As you may have gleaned, listeners, from some of the topics that we've hit on, there's debates on almost every single one of these aspects of bilingualism. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Well, like I said, listeners, this is an introductory episode to bilingualism. I'm going to post this as soon as I get it edited. if you happen to like look at this video as soon as it goes up, not all of the links and research notes and blah, blah, blah will necessarily be in the description box when it first goes up, but as Safie compiles it and gets it to me, I'll add it into the description box. So if you were interested in something that she said, and you want to know more about it, if you happen to look when the information is not yet there, just look back in a day or two and it might be up. Otherwise, if you want to reach out directly, you can hit me up on Twitter at Huck1995, HUCK1995. You can ask me a question and I'll relay it to Safie because she doesn't really use Twitter. But
I don't even remember my handle.
I know it.
Oh, good.
Should I pitch it?
No,
Okay.
I never check it.
Okay. Well, anyway, if you do have a pointed question that is directly applicable to something that we had here, feel free to direct it to me. Otherwise, we'll probably end up addressing it in the future conversations about bilingualism with the experts. So, if it's
I'm not an expert at all.
Yeah, she's a linguist, but she hasn't actually done like clinical research within this field or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I've read a lot about this research, and I've read a lot of studies conducted in this field, but I can't say that I'm not an expert. That's all I want to get said.
Yeah, so if you have a pointed question, feel free to ask me, but keep in mind that if you just hold those questions for a little bit, the links will either appear in the description box below if you are one of the first people to listen to this, or you will probably have those questions answered in future conversations within this series on bilingualism anyway on the show. So, on that note, this has been another episode of
What the Huck?
All right, take care, everybody. We'll see you again very soon.
Bye-bye.